Thank you for joining us on this 16th day of December 2021. South Africa's High Court orders former President Zuma to go back to jail. OMICRON continues to cause global disruption as many countries ban tourists over Omicron. Meanwhile, in the U.S., President Joe Biden meets tornado victims in Kentucky. For this and more stories, you're watching Switch Focus. I'm Harriet Chimeno. Our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Now to our top story. A court in South Africa has ordered the return to jail of former President Jacob Zuma. The decision invalidates a previous decision to free Zuma on parole on medical grounds. The 79-year-old former president was sentenced to 15 months in prison for having repeatedly refused to appear before an inquiry commission investigating corruption during his time in office. Zuma's incarceration in July sparked a wave of unprecedented violence in KwaZulu-Natal and Johannesburg. The former president was freed on September 5th on medical grounds. The latest court decision can be appealed by the former president.
To appear before an inquiry commission investigating corruption.
Moving on, the Sudanese army has been deployed along the disputed border with Ethiopia. The military announced they have full control of the region, increasing the tensions with Addis Ababa. On December 1st, Sudanese troops announced they have dismantled and taken control of an Ethiopian settlement in the disputed Al-Fashaga area. The announcement followed reports that 21 Sudanese soldiers have been killed and 30 others wounded in clashes with Ethiopian forces in Birkat Nurain in the disputed area 4 days earlier. Following the clashes, Sudan military ruler Gedan Abdel Fattah vowed that his country would not cede an inch of territory to Ethiopia.
On December 1st, Sudanese troops announced they had dismantled and taken control of an Ethiopian settlement in the disputed Al-Fashaga area. The announcement followed reports that 21 Sudanese soldiers had been killed and 30 others wounded in clashes with Ethiopian forces in Birkat Nurain in the disputed area 4 days earlier. Following the clashes, Sudan's military ruler vowed that his country would not cede an inch of territory to Ethiopia.
Moving on, 1 week after the fire at the Gitega prison in Burundi, families of the victims are still in the dark about the remains of their loved ones, with some not being able to bury their relatives. So far, 38 people have died and 69 have been injured in the fire. Some have already lifted their partial mourning. Lemayan reports.
This is a tale of an orphan father following the fire at Gitega Central Prison.
After the fire, we learned that our father was among the victims. We waited for the burial but in vain, and we organized the partial mourning in accordance with Burundian tradition.
Families complain they have not been given access to the remains of the victims. Legal representatives believe the state should have been involved in the funerals.
This funeral should have been organized by the state. Failing that, at least the bodies should have been returned to their respective families so that they could organize the funerals themselves. So I dare to hope that it is one or the other option. We are still waiting for that day to come.
The penal establishment has a capacity of 400 inmates but housed more than 1,500 prisoners. Former prosecutor raises the issue of overcrowding and suggests an alternative.
Freedom is the principle and detention the exception. This principle should be translated into the laws and regulations of Burundi. All those who are serving their sentences and who have already served a quarter of their sentences should be released if at least their files are in order in terms of discipline.
According to official figures, 38 people died and 69 were injured in the fire. Burundi's 11 prisons held 12,878 prisoners for a capacity of 4,924, according to the prison administration. Latina Lemayan for Switch TV.
Now on matters COVID-19, 2 shots of Pfizer's COVID vaccine offers around 70% protection against severe disease from Omicron, according to results of a study published in South Africa. The emergence of the highly mutated variant, first detected in South Africa last month, sparked fears that it could cause severe disease and be more contagious or can evade vaccines. Early indicators suggest that it could be more transmissible, but promising data so far has suggested that vaccines still offer protection against Omicron. Shilangetich with this story.
The latest research out of South Africa suggested that 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine still offered protection against serious illness.
The study indicated that there has been a reduction in the effectiveness of the 2-dose Pfizer vaccine against the general protection of infection. So it seems to provide 33% protection against infection, whereas previously in South Africa, and the previous variant was the Delta variant in South Africa, it provided close to 80% protection against infection. So quite a significant reduction in protection against infection.
2 doses of the vaccine offered 93% protection against earlier variants, according to the companies. The study was based on the results of 78,000 PCR tests taken in South Africa between November 15th and December 7th and was conducted by Discovery along with the South African Medical Research Council.
The good news is what we are seeing in South Africa is a much milder course of disease. So what we're seeing is lower rates of hospital admission. So on average, we're seeing 29% less severity of disease compared to prior variants, and that is very, very good news.
But NOC warns that despite the protection offered by 2 doses, hospitals could still be overrun since Omicron is spreading rapidly in South Africa. Last week, South Africa approved booster shots for all citizens over 18 as it seeks to stem the rise of new infections. So far, more than 17 million people have been vaccinated in South Africa, or around a third of the country's population. The government had initially wanted to vaccinate around 70% of the population by year's end, but has moved the target to March 2022. Pfizer had previously said that 2 shots may not be enough to protect against Omicron, though they had appeared to be effective against severe disease. In a preliminary study published last week, the company said a 3rd shot appeared to be effective against this strain. Shilangetich, Switch TV.
Still on matters COVID-19, Mozambican President Filipe Nyusi has urged people to comply with measures to control the spread of the new coronavirus variant. He told everyone to get vaccinated against COVID-19 while threatening to introduce restrictions of services to unvaccinated people. This comes amid a recent rise in days of the number of daily infections. The country has already confirmed 17 cases of the Omicron variant. Last month saw a steep decline in the number of daily infections, with the coronavirus figures being in the single digits before they started to rise this month. Several universities were forced to move final exams online. Apple shut down some of its stores temporarily, and long lines formed at many testing clinics in New York City, scenes reminiscent of the early days of the pandemic. As the threat of the new wave of COVID-19 brought renewed disruption, a jump in positive tests has also left 3 major North American sports leagues scrambling to control outbreaks. Chapter Boyd with more.
While the Delta variant remains responsible for the vast majority of US cases, Omicron has turned up in at least 36 states, and the numbers are still growing fast.
We expect to see the proportion of Omicron cases here in the United States continue to grow in the coming weeks. Early data suggests that Omicron is more transmissible than Delta, with a doubling time of about 2 days.
While much is still not known about the new variant, White House officials say the country would not go back into lockdown and grade schools would remain open, saying existing tools like endomasking and boosters put the country in a much better position than a year ago. In the UK, which hit its highest number of daily cases at any time during the pandemic, Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty says Omicron is a serious threat.
It is moving at an absolutely phenomenal pace.
And in Canada, top health officials have advised against international travel.
We know that this may sound very drastic to many listening, but we must avoid overloading our hospital system and our healthcare workers.
Boosters reconstitute the antibody titers and enhance the vaccine protection against Omicron.
Dr. Anthony Fauci says booster doses of currently available COVID-19 vaccines work against Omicron, and there appears to be no need for a variant-specific booster. Though without the booster, all 3 U.S. authorized COVID-19 vaccines appear to be significantly less protective against Omicron in laboratory testing than against previous variants. Chapter Boyd, Switch TV.
We now take a short break, but we'll be right back with more. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the broadcast. My name is Harriet Shima and our sign anchor is Tracy Dorcas. Now we move on, where U.S. President Joe Biden walked through the battered remains of 2 Kentucky cities on Wednesday to get a first-hand view of the destruction wrought by one of the deadliest tornado outbreaks in the recent U.S. history. And in the wake of the deadly tornadoes and severe storms, the devastated area, he announced that the federal government would cover 100% of costs of emergency work for the first 30 days after the extreme weather event. This comes 2 days after President Biden amended the Kentucky Disaster Declaration to make additional assistance available, increasing federal funding.
And I intend to do whatever it takes, as long as it takes to support your state, your local leaders, and as you recover and rebuild, because you will recover and you will rebuild. You know, the scope and scale of this destruction is almost beyond belief. When you look around here, it's just almost beyond belief. These tornadoes devoured everything in their path. And, you know, as I flew over here in the helicopter, you can look down and you see a house 20 yards away from a house that's devastated, and the house is in good shape. I mean, it's just, tornadoes are such devastating storms. The fact is, I'm going to make sure the federal government steps up and makes sure we do every single thing. For years and years, as U.S. Senator and then as Vice President, I come from Delaware, we have a lot of serious storms. Hurricanes, oceans rising, a whole range of things. But you know what? It always took a long time. There's no reason why it should take any time. We have the wherewithal to get it done. And we're going to get every single thing you need. And I'm going to make sure the federal government does what's needed.
Now on to a sad state of affairs. 4 children were killed and several more badly injured in Australia after strong winds lifted a bouncy castle into the air during the end-of-year school celebrations, causing them to fall 10 meters. 2 boys and 2 girls in the final year of primary school died from the accident in Devonport in the northwest of Tasmania state on Wednesday morning. 5 more children were in hospital, including 1 in a serious condition. Terudubai has more.
The latest research out of South Africa suggested that 2 doses of the PFIZER vaccine still offered protection against serious illness.
The study indicated that there has been a reduction in the effectiveness of the 2-dose PFIZER vaccine against the general protection of infection. So it seems to provide 33%.
Apologies for that small hitch. Now we move on, where Libya has reserves of about 48 billion barrels of crude oil and about 52 trillion cubic feet of gas. According to Mahmoud DIEUNE, Libyan Minister of Oil and Gas, he says that the future of Libya in oil is a promising future and that Libya has many oil and gas discoveries that can be developed. Wayne Julius with more.
Libya's oil and gas minister said his country had a promising future, pointing to large oil and gas reserves that he suggested could generate enormous wealth for the North African nation. Speaking in the capital Tripoli, Mohamed Ans said Libya had 48 barrels of crude oil and 52 trillion of cubic feet of natural gas.
We have many oil and gas discoveries that can be developed, and it is possible to open the door to foreign investment.
Noting the international agency's plan to drastically reduce oil consumption in the next decade, Ons stressed there was pressure on the Libyan state to work on large projects to exploit this wealth to the developed country. He said oil revenues, which constitute of 90% of Libya's income, should be invested in infrastructure, city development, and health and education.
The basis is for the Libyans to live a decent life, given that the oil wealth is enormous compared to the population of Libya.
Libya's oil production is currently 1.3 million barrels per day, and it may be increased to 1.8 barrels per day in the upcoming year. Julius Wayne for Switch Television.
Back to the school tragedy. 4 children were killed and several more badly injured in Australia after strong winds lifted a bouncy castle into the air during the end of year school celebrations, causing them to fall 10 meters. 2 boys and 2 girls in the final year of primary school died from the accident in Devonport in the northwest of Tasmania state on Wednesday morning. 5 more children were in hospital, including 1 in a serious condition. Terry Dubai has more.
There was no immediate explanation for how the jumping castle became airborne, and no other details were released of the children's identities, except that the incident took place in Ilres Primary School. Students in the last year of primary school, year 6, are typically aged 10 or 11. The accident would rank among Australia's deadliest involving an amusement ride and brought on a wave of disbelief and mourning.
Police and emergency services were called to the scene just after 10 a.m. this morning, and it appears a wind gust has caused a jumping castle to lift into the air. Several children fell from the jumping castle, and it appears they may have fallen from a height of approximately 10 metres.
Tasmanian Premier Peter Guiten said that it is simply inconceivable that this shocking tragedy had occurred and promised a thorough investigation. Prime Minister Scott Morrison described the accident as shattering and heartbreaking.
Young children on a fun day out together with their families, and it turns to such horrific tragedy at this time of year. It just breaks your heart.
Hine, the police commissioner, said after an initial investigation, the accident will be referred to a coroner for an inquest. Terry Dubai, Switch TV.
Our hearts go out to the families affected. Now we move on, where communication, which is an important expression of one's thoughts and desires and feelings to other parties. But we all know that sometimes this has been a great challenge for people living with hearing impairment. Very people in the public sphere in Kenya have the ability to communicate and interpret sign language, and this has further alienated those with hearing impairment. Chapter Boyd tells us more.
To open up the communication world to the deaf, Eli Savatia and Lumona Mulangwa, together with their team at VIZAVIZ, have developed an assistive technology referred to as a chinoma. The app, they say, helps to facilitate communication between the hearing community and those with hearing impairment. Eli Savatia is the Chief Executive Officer at VIZAVIZ.
We've built the first of its kind, a platform that's leveraging the power of AI, machine learning, to bridge the communication barrier between these two groups. And our technology is ensuring that they are able to access and communicate in the immediate environment.
The innovation aims to promote confidentiality in communication between the deaf and hearing community, especially where sensitive information is involved.
And also it can be used in areas like hospitals, banks, where sensitive information are shared, where you can't have a third party there. Yeah, because you can't share, like, your bank PIN or something like that if you're a deaf person.
A chinoma has its translations in English and decodes Kenyan Sign Language to either audio or text. The application has 2 major options, one translating from sign language and the other translating to sign language, and one can either voice out or type. Like any other innovation, the duo say they have experienced many challenges during data collection and training the software to encode signs from different people. The work continues and will not stop until they are able to give more and more people with hearing impairment a chance for communication. Chapter 8, Switch TV.
The United Nations Cultural Agency UNESCO added Senegal's national dish, a rice and fish platter called DIEUNE, to its cultural heritage list. This means a rice with fish. In Senegal's dominant language Wolof, DIEUNE takes about 3 hours to prepare and is commonly served at lunch in the West African nation. Shilangitage with more.
In a small restaurant in Senegal's seaside capital, Dakar, Tiane Ngom has risen early to cook a batch of thiebou, the country's most popular dish, before the lunch rush. To the sound of Senegal's popular mbalax music, the 53-year-old restaurant owner washes and prepares onions, garlics, carrots to go with the fish and rice. As the onions crackle in oil, Ngom's face lights up when she learns that thiebou has been added to the UNESCO Cultural Heritage List.
I really thank God in Senegal rice with fish has become part of the eating habit. If this dish is recognized worldwide, it makes me very proud. From now on, people will come here to taste our dish, and especially to learn how to cook it.
Thiebou is a staple of her restaurant and has never been off the menu in its 25 years of existence, a testament to its widespread popularity. Thiebou is usually eaten with hands, but spoons and forks are also commonly used in Dakar restaurants.
If UNESCO decided to make it, it's a source of pride. It is also a way of paying tribute to our mothers who ensure that this meal is well prepared. It is a way of paying tribute to them.
The northern Senegalese city of Saint Louis is believed to be the birthplace of Thiebou, the city whose old center is itself a UNESCO World Heritage Site, borders the Atlantic Ocean and hosts a thriving fishing community. Shilangitage, Switch TV.
The Carthage Theatre Days, known as JTC, one of the most important festivals of theatre in Africa, was back from December 4th to 12th in Tunis, the Tunisian capital, after a break in 2020 due to the pandemic. The 22nd edition of the festival was held to the great delight and pleasure of theatre lovers. 14 shows completed in the festival and 50 others were shown in a dozen theatres across Tunis. Lemayan with this story.
There was an air of the Côte d'Ivoire on the most beautiful theatre in the city, the stage of the Municipal Theatre of Tunis. There, Agni women presented to the public a healing ceremony of the Comians. Also there was the GPS show by the Algerian National Theatre Troupe, which received the prize for the best direction and the prize for the best male role in the satirical reflection on freedom in modern society. Mohamed Chechel was its director.
The GPS show by the Algerian National Theatre Troupe received the prize for best direction and the prize for best male role. It speaks of the society and control, and that's exactly what GPS is, a tool of orientation. And we all human beings are oriented in our societies, so we are not free.
The show was received by great enthusiasm by the audience. Ali Enosor, a student in scenic art, took part as a spectator.
The show was received with great enthusiasm by the audience. It is a show that proves that Algeria has made an evolution in the theatre. Thank you to the Carthage Theatre Days to have chosen this show.
Actor and dancer Amel Lawini played the role of Marilyn Monroe, a caricatured and very provocative character in The Passion of Einstein's Nightmare. Amel expressed delight she was able to play in front of the public after a long break due to the pandemic.
For me, after the pandemic, this is like a sigh of relief through the participation in the JTC. We remained 2 years without work and without presenting our works in front of the public. Festivals and shows are opportunities that allow us to exist and to be close to people we were deprived of working for almost 2 years, but now It starts again little by little.
The theatrical season of Tunis continues across Tunis, but the JTC has now ended and should return in late 2022. Letina Lemayan, Switch TV. That story brings us to the end of our bulletin. My Sen anchor has been Tracy Dorcas, my director Rose Roberts, my producer Polo James, and I, Harriet Chimea. Enjoy the rest of your viewership.